to Merit Street Media. Tonight on Dr. Phil Primetime, we're talking about something that could affect half of America. That means you. Hundreds of thousands of children are winding up at the hands of their abusers, and family courts are missing this.
There are a lot of judges who've never practiced family law who take the bench.
You need expert eyes on these children. A judge is not a doctor.
Do judges listen?
Not a lot of the time they don't.
Why?
They don't want to believe it, and they want to give that parent another chance, but that one chance is when that kid could die.
Guys, thank you very much. All right, thank you. Tonight, we're talking about something that could affect half of America. That means you. So listen up, because what you learn could change your life and that of the people you love the most. When the traditional family breaks down, everything starts unraveling. Let's look a little deeper at what's happening, starting with some stunning numbers on marriage and family in America. In 1960, at the height of the baby boom, after World War II, 5% of children were born to unwed parents. By 1980, that number tripled, reaching 18%. In 2016, a whopping 40% of children in the U.S. were born to women who were single moms or living with a non-marital partner. Now let's talk about divorce. According to the CDC, in 2021, a total of 689,308 divorces occurred across the United States. Many will head to family court. In family courts, the matter of custody is generally viewed as a he said, she said. And boy, can it get ugly when parents use their children as pawns, when they use them as a rope in a tug-of-war. These custody cases reveal a national crisis in the family court system that regularly, all too regularly, misses warning signs that exposes too many children to abuse and, in fact, death. Now, 22-year-old RJ says he and his siblings were in a 15-year tug-of-war between his mother and father, and the family court, well, he says they just made it worse.
My two protectors should have been my mom and dad, but they were both fighting in family court, so I was caught in the middle of it with my siblings. We were on our own. Me and my siblings definitely felt helpless. We felt like we had no power.
You know, the children get caught in the middle of this. They pick up the tab for the parents' fight, and RJ says he was collateral damage of a broken system that failed him. And we're going to meet he and his mother later and find out why the judge on their case sent his mother to jail. But first, I sent former Los Angeles criminal prosecutor and now our co-anchor of News on Merit Street, Lonnie Coombs, on an assignment she says she is very passionate about. Is Lady Justice failing families throughout America?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Phil. You know, we see these appalling headlines. A Colorado mom suspected of killing her two kids. She was days away from losing them to her ex in a custody battle. A divorced father allegedly sets his home on fire, killing his 3 children inside while their mother was at work. A mom, in the midst of a custody battle, drowns her kids in a murder-suicide. But you know, Dr. Phil, as horrific as these headlines are, they still don't give the full story.
Every 6 days, a child dies amid custody fights and family court lapses. Even more sobering, since 2008, 984 children were killed by a parental figure. Family courts involved in these cases often miss the signs of trouble. Research suggests that the emphasis on prioritizing parental visitation, even in cases where abuse is present, put kids at risk. kids become pawns in a divorce tug-of-war. Every year, 58,000 children sent pursuant to a custody order or for unprotected visitation end up with abusers. In fact, nearly half of custody evaluators still recommend unsupervised visits despite reports of family violence. In 2020, more than 588,000 kids were victims of abuse or neglect. In 2019, more than 672,000 kids spent time in foster care in the U.S., and statistics suggest that about 1/3 of the children placed in foster care are abused. All of this is evidence that the system meant to protect our kids is broken.
Well, those numbers are shocking. What it amounts to is the fact that hundreds of thousands of children are winding up at the hands of their abusers, and family courts are missing this. Sometimes they're complicit in turning these children over to the abusers when they have evidence right in front of them that they're abusers. Now, Lonnie headed back to the courtroom to find out why two fathers say their battle for their children was like facing off with an organized crime syndicate.
Do you feel that the system in the family law courts is corrupt?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I would say it's organized crime. It's like a mafia. I like to call it the state-sanctioned destruction of the family.
A parent can make a false allegation against the other one, and they immediately can go to court and get a protective order, restraining order based on that allegation. A lot of people call them silver bullets because it only takes one to basically win custody.
How much has this whole process ended up costing you financially?
2.5 years ago, I quit keeping track, and 2.5 years ago it was about $700,000. Overall, I lost about 3.5 years with my children.
We would like audio and video cameras added to the courtrooms, and we would like to lower the immunity barrier. Currently, judges have absolute immunity, and where there is no accountability, you're going to have corruption. Judges should actually be held to a higher standard instead of no standard at all.
Well, we have three high-powered pros here tonight who know how to navigate around the family courtroom and the legal system in general. Joining Lonnie are Michigan Circuit Court Judge Rosemarie Aquilina. She presides over family and criminal court cases. She was a family law attorney for 20 years, and also Dr. Charles Sophie. He has been an expert on my show and a member of my Blue Ribbon Advisory Board for a number of years. He is a psychiatrist, former medical director of the Los Angeles County Department of Child and Family Services. He's triple board certified. Now, I've been talking about the fact that the family court system is broken. Judge, am I right?
You're right. There are a lot of judges who've never practiced family law who actually take the bench. And without that experience, they do a disservice. It takes a while to learn it. There are a lot of classes that should be offered and training, and so many cases before the family court bench should have been done by a lawyer before they become a judge. That doesn't happen. So there's a learning curve, and families get caught in it.
And Dr. Sophie, when you do a study, you'll send a social worker out to do a home study.
Yes.
You'll evaluate the parents.
Yes.
And people get confused. This isn't about who's the best parent. It's whether either parent is suitable, right?
Right. But it's also, is that child being abused or neglected? And that's what you need, expert eyes on these children. And in LA, we put a system together so those children are seen by expert eyes as they enter the system, by a mental health expert and a physical expert, who can evaluate a bruise or evaluate the story so that they can give the judge the information. A judge is not a doctor.
Do judges listen?
No, not a lot of the time they don't.
Why?
Because they don't want to believe it sometimes. It's hard. They see a mother standing there saying, did you really hurt your kid? And they want to give that parent another chance, but that one chance is when that kid could die.
And Lonnie, you said half the time, even when they determine that there is abuse happening by a parent, they still award custody to that parent in unsupervised visitation.
Yeah, I really think that the system overall is failing the children. The basic rule of family law court is in the best interest of the child.
Right.
But what does that mean? How does that actually be enacted? And that's what we really need to look at.
Well, I'm trained in forensic psychology, And I've been appointed by the court a number of times. And if I didn't have a judge listening to what I said, I stood up and said, what the hell did you send me out there for if you're not going to listen to what I said? I've written a report and now you're going to just arbitrarily make a decision. I wasn't real popular with the judges when I did that. You have to have professionals that will stand up for their work, right?
Yeah.
You do, but not in every state. And we get experts when and if we need them. A lot of people can't afford, and the system's not built to pay for those expert opinions. And I want to talk about what you just said. It's in the best interest of the children, not the parents.
Right.
And the children really get lost in the system because judges don't spend enough time listening to the children. The children know what's going on, and because of age or other issues, they don't believe them. And so the children get caught in the middle.
Listening to the children and talking to the experts, that's where the judges should get their information.
Exactly.
Decision.
And when I was appointed, I saw myself in the role as an ad litem for the children. And I would say to the parent's lawyer, please cross-examine me.
Right.
Please cross-examine me, because you're not going to like the answers.
And cross-examination is the greatest truth teller. Cross-examination should occur every time.
Yeah, I invited it. And it usually went a lot shorter than they thought, because they started asking questions they didn't like the answer to. And there's like, I withdraw the question. No, you ask it. I'm going to answer it. All right, later tonight, we're going to meet a father who says CPS did nothing to help him when he discovered his daughter was locked in a basement 14 hours at a time. But first, we'll talk to RJ, who says he spent nearly half of his life in family court because his parents were at war. We'll add him to the conversation next.
When my parents split up, my dad emptied all these split bank accounts, left my mom without anything, and then we were left homeless. My dad, I would blame for breaking up my family because he just hated my mom so much. He just wanted to see her miserable. And I think that dragged on family court for a long time.
22-year-old RJ says he spent half of his life in family courtroom where he was given no voice and a judge that was biased against his mother.
I would describe the family court treatment of my mom as unjust. I was in my dad's custody for 5 years. When I would talk to my dad about wanting to live with my mom, he'd say he would rather send us to foster care. For periods of time, it was abusive. He would just start yelling at me and start getting physical, pushing and grabbing for the most part. And then he was also an alcoholic. So there were multiple nights where he'd drink too much and pass out. And there were a few nights where he forgot who we were. DCF had gotten involved in our case multiple times, and they ended up substantiating him for neglect, but that didn't change anything. Before I ran away to live with my mom, he verbally disowned me. He said, "You're not my son." And then after he had passed, I found out he wrote me out of the will. I have no relationship with my siblings. They had told me multiple times they resented me for leaving them behind, so I did feel guilt. I think the family court process has impacted me negatively in a lot of ways. I think it made me mature at a young age when I should have just been having fun as a kid. I think it caused a decent amount of trauma, and I think it also just gave me a lack of trust.
Did the judge ever sit down and talk to you?
No, never. For the most part, it would be GLs and therapists, and by the time I was 14, I had already ran away, so I wasn't involved as much.
But no officer of the court ever sat down with you and said, talk to me about what you want to do, what you think is going on, what's best in your life?
Outside of therapists and GLs, no.
No, I know you. That'd be the first thing you'd do, right?
Absolutely. You have to give the children a voice.
You said the judge was biased against your mom. How do you know that?
Just some of the rulings she did when I was younger. She held my mom, and we were blackmailed by my father, and we were told she wouldn't be released until we went back with our dad.
But you only know that from what your mom told you.
No, there was a hearing that day. My mom got taken into police custody at the hearing. My dad and the GAL drove from Hartford to Glastonbury which is like roughly 15 minutes away, came to the house because we were with her mom, staying with her, but she went to the hearing, and we were told that she wouldn't be released.
Judges don't just put people in jail. I suspect there was a contempt of court, perhaps for not returning the children or other behavior, and that's why she was put in jail. And it's sad to me that any of the kids know about the facts of this case, because the children should not be involved. This is a marriage that was dissolved between two adults, and they should both facilitate a positive relationship between the children and the other parent, and the children should not know what's going on in court. So I have a problem with that.
And you know, Dr. Phil, there's another professional in this mix, which is the children's social worker, who has a whole nother point of view. And that could differ or agree with the judge.
Right. And you mentioned GAL, that's guardian ad litem.
Yes,
Right.
correct.
And a guardian ad litem, by the way, is someone that is appointed by the court who has no duty to either parent whatsoever. They have an undivided loyalty to the child, supposedly.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the theory. And that's supposed to be the role of the Department of Child and Family Services
Right.
as well, right? To protect
Yes.
the interests of the
But
child.
oftentimes it's not,
Well,
unfortunately.
it's hard sometimes for them to serve that best interest, because if they take them out of the home and they can't go to another family member and they put them into foster care,
Right. But that's why I put a system in place. We don't take a kid out of a home until we have a real reason, an expert's opinion that it's abuse or neglect. Otherwise, if we break a family up, it's really difficult getting them back together.
all right, coming up, we're going to meet RJ's mom, who says her 15-year custody battle destroyed her, and she blames two people, and she'll tell us who next. Lori says her 15-year custody battle for her 4 children destroyed her family, and she blames it all on the woman behind the bench.
I do blame the court for breaking up my family. In 2006, my ex-husband filed for divorce. Then he filed to change custody of my children. We were in the family court for 15 years. Different judges. One is known for ruling against women. He gave my ex-husband custody. He gave me visitation, so I would have to be able to pick the children up from school 3 o'clock, but I worked until 5. The order made no sense because it basically rendered me unemployed. I ended up resigning, losing my job. They just stacked the deck against me. In 2015, my 4 younger children decided they weren't going to go back to their father's house. My ex-husband showed up and they refused to go. He called our town police. I ended up being arrested for custodial interference. I was found guilty. They sentenced me 90 days and they took me off to prison that morning. I have no memory from then until I arrived in the prison. So, oh my gosh, I'm getting so emotional. Can we take a break? I felt that my ex-husband was alienating the children from me. He wouldn't let me talk to them. He would hang up the phone. They still don't speak to me. I feel victimized by the family court. I don't know how a mother can lose so many years of their children's lives and not be a victim.
There's 3 things I say a lot when it involves children, and one is you never involve children in adult issues. Number 2, you don't ever hold children responsible for things they don't control. And the third thing I say a lot is you don't ever want to invite the government into your life.
I agree with that.
I've heard you say before, you need to love your child more than you hate your ex or your spouse or whatever. That's critical, right?
It's absolutely right. To be a fit parent and for a judge to make that decision on your behalf, you have to love your children more than you hate the other parent. They cannot be used as pawns. You cannot groom them to say what you want. Judges figure it out. And if they don't, an expert will.
Right.
And it's just not in the best interest of the child.
Right.
Why do you think that this judge was out to get you? Why do you think this whole thing spun out of control to your detriment?
My ex-husband and I were wealthy. So I think that wealthy families have more of those funds to spend on the experts and the evaluations and things like that. So I think that was part of it. But
That's
it's
not
also
part of it, ma'am. Let me just say that a high conflict case is one where there are children that you're fighting over. Has nothing to do with money. They would not have looked at your bank book. So I'm sorry, but I think your premise is not right.
Yet somewhere you lost the best interest of your kids.
I don't necessarily think it was the judge, but I do think that the lawyers know. And I do think that they can induce some conflict. My husband and I didn't get along, but we did get divorced by agreement. I'm not saying that we got along great, but after we were divorced, we did spend our first Christmas together. So we're not these people who were just at each other's throats.
So why all the conflict then?
I think my husband did hate me more than he loved our children. And to see me grow and to be able to move beyond the marriage, I think really upset him. And I also think it was the decisions of the court were very hard for both of us to live with.
Well, the judge said the kids would stay with the father and sent you to jail.
Correct.
And that's a pretty radical position for a judge to take. There is a presumption that children should have their mother in their life,
Right.
unless there is a profound reason for there not to be. And for a judge to say, nope, kids are going with the father and you're going to jail.
Right.
Now, that doesn't just happen out of the blue. Why did the judge do that?
So it's two separate incidents. So there was a big push in Connecticut at that time for fathers' rights. The judge switched the custody. I had returned to work. My husband was unemployed. I do think there was some.
You said you were wealthy.
We were when we started. 5 years in, that was diminishing.
Why'd you go to jail?
When the children refused to go to their father, DCF placed them with my mother. And I was charged that day, which then at that point, there was a DCF investigation launched, and he was substantiated for neglect. So I was giving my children a voice. They spoke to experts.
Why did you go to jail for 58 days?
Fast forward 2017, those charges came about. They wanted me to take a deal to nullify the charges. I didn't take the deal, went to trial, and I was found guilty of custodial interference.
And
Ma'am, you didn't return the children when you were supposed to. That's contempt of court. Did you say, let's walk out to Dad's car? Did you try anything like that?
I did encourage them. But
How?
at the time,
How did you encourage them?
I said, your father's here, it's time to go. But they were telling me that their father was drinking. So he said he was going to call the police, and I said, please do, because of what the children were saying. And in that process, DCF did investigate and did substantiate neglect because he did have an alcohol problem.
But
Okay, we got to take a break, and we're going to come back and look at this from the court's point of view. And because look, I've said you don't want to go to the court. You don't want to get in the court system because there are rules there, and you're going to have to follow them, or they will take you out of the game. They will take you off the game board and put your children sometimes where they don't belong. The judge says there are holes in that story because she entered the game and then didn't play the game by the court's rules. We'll talk about that next. Now, we actually talked to the court and got an opinion on Lori's case. One of the quotes was, parties continue relentless litigation, have been either unemployed or underemployed for the past few years. Their demands of their continued litigation. Given the parties' repetitive and consistent returns to the court has become an unintended chronicle of the family's post-dissolution functioning, brimming with decisions of the defendant that continue to display poor judgment. That's referring to you. What do you read into that?
The court was tired of the fighting. The court gives a strong message when it uses that kind of language. It tells me also that when they say that defendant was making poor decisions, that she probably did not have legal custody for that reason, and the court continued to see poor judgment, and so the fighting was ongoing, and they made a point to put all of those things there, sending a hopeful message, which the parties never got.
Would you do this different?
Yes.
How?
less of that. As an older, wiser person, I would tell my younger self to let the small stuff go. It's not worth it. And I would be in a very different place if I had done that.
Yeah, and you got to pick your battles, and there comes a time where you got to pick up the phone and call your partner, your ex, and say, hey, this isn't good for RJ, this isn't good for the others. And if you break this down and look at why you lost custody, the court's position is failure to protect, educational neglect, consistent violations of court orders, inability to foster positive relationships between children and other parent, and displays bad judgment. You gave them ammunition. And I know the story behind every one of those and could make a great argument on your part. And I mean that sincerely, but you give them ammunition.
Right.
And your ex is not here, and I could make a list to fill all three of these screens for criticisms of him and his contribution, and none of it is in the best interest of the children.
Right.
Correct.
That's the problem.
My ex-husband would disagree, but I felt he was alienating me from the children. He felt I was alienating him from the children. And we really needed some co-parenting,
Yes, you
which
did.
I always asked for.
Right.
And he would not participate. I remember one therapist telling me, you want to give your children free-range chicken and your ex-husband is giving them Cheetos, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And it takes a while for that to be okay. And it was just analogous of all the things that you have expectations that you want met and they're not, which was a lot of the bickering.
Yes.
Right? Because can you just not feed them Cheetos? We didn't go to court over Cheetos.
Yes.
But it was.
Damn near.
We did not. But we
That's
did,
about the only thing.
right. We did go to court over Little League schedules and soccer schedules and that stuff. I wanted it for my children. And in the moment, it's like, this is what's best for them. But the fighting
Yes, has wounded them.
Right. I wanted them to have a great life, but fighting with their father was more detrimental than missing Little League.
And that does have lifelong impact on the
Right.
children.
Right.
As they're growing up, they are literally pawns being thrown back and forth between the two people they're supposed to trust the
Right.
most and who are supposed to be protecting them from all of this.
When I did go to battle, or actually go, it was over him drinking and passing out and the children putting themselves to bed and stories coming from all four children. And I was married to him, so I knew that this was not far-fetched.
Yes.
That's allegedly.
Yes, but you
Right.
could jump in and help them with their father. That would have been better.
Right.
We have to stop and take a break here. What you just said about your ex-husband is allegedly. He's not here to defend himself as he's passed away.
Yes, yes.
And I do want to give you the final word, RJ.
I mean, yeah, it was just my dad was given a lot of power by the family court because he did hate my mom. He wanted to see her miserable. He told me that multiple times growing up, and I think that was dangerous. And it also sucked for me and my siblings. Unrelated to our parents is that all the professionals involved gave us no say. They kept saying, once you turn 12, you get a say. Once you turn 13, they kept pushing it back. And it got to the point where I took it into my own hands. Me and my dad physically fought. The police got involved, and I was given to my mom. And then a couple of years later is when she went to jail, and I was just left there. The state of Connecticut didn't send anyone. She never came home. I came home from school. No one was there. Luckily, she had friends and family. But if she didn't, I would have been on my own at 15.
Right.
So I have no relationship with my siblings. They won't talk to me because my dad did alienate them from us after I ran away. I was able to go see my dad. They weren't allowed to see us.
And you're open to seeing your siblings if they were open to seeing you.
Absolutely. I've reached out to them countless times. It's basically at the point where I just have to wait until they reach out to me.
You said all this time in court, you never had a voice. That's why I wanted you to have the final word here to say.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll meet a father who says the family court was intentionally trying to put him on track to be a deadbeat dad. We'll find out what he means by that when we come back. Jason says his 8-year custody battle nearly killed him, but that he would do anything for his daughter.
Family court was the toughest fight of my life. My daughter's mother and I, we split. So I retained an attorney and filed for custody. My concerns about my daughter being in my ex's custody were first and foremost safety. There was a history of prescription, pill use, and other recreational drugs.
You like it?
I wasn't happy with the outcome of the custody. I was treated like a deadbeat dad. I expressed my concerns and they were dismissed. The first time I noticed something that seemed weird was September of 16. On her leg, she had bruising, which was identical to someone grabbing. From there on out, it was getting more regularly, like every couple weeks. It wasn't until her hand was slammed on a door that action really seemed to take place. All 5 digits were lacerated, fractured knuckle, 2 jammed fingers. My attorney filed a motion. A friend of the court ruled that I would be primary. I had people saying to me, like, you can't keep spending this money. Do you think I give a about $7,500 if my daughter dies? I can go make more money. And I'm not rich by any means, but I don't know if I wouldn't be able to look at myself or forgive myself.
Jason, what do you think the courts could have done differently with your case?
I think the courts could have paid attention to the evidence, held true to their word. At the initial conciliation when I filed custody, it's not very evidentiary. So it was he said, she said. And I was treated like a deadbeat dad, which was shocking because that wasn't how I saw myself. But that was how the conciliator saw it.
You actually came to get help from Judge Aquilina, right?
I've known Judge Aquilina now for almost 20 years. And when I'd be at the courthouse, I'd see if she was in her chambers. We'd have coffee, and I'd end up just crying on her shoulder, basically. And she always lent a gentle ear, was very diplomatic, and just kept telling me to stay in the fight.
Mm-hmm. And what was the toughest thing that you saw him having to face and deal with, Judge?
There were orders, things that he didn't want to do. And I said, Jason, no matter what the court orders, the court doesn't always get it right. You have to follow the orders, and the court will eventually see that you are the fit parent and the custodial parent, but it's going to take some time. And he sobbed at that because he was not happy with some of the decisions, but he, to the letter, followed the orders of the court and eventually got his daughter.
And that's hard when you're in a situation where you have physical, photographic evidence.
Yes.
That it's like you say, a blind person can see these are not fall down bruises. These fit fingerprint patterns. You can see exactly how this happens.
Yep.
And Dr. Sophie, how many times have you looked at this kind of thing?
1 million times. Tells the story right there. It's the whole story.
And when somebody ignores that,
that's the problem.
You know, and thank heavens Jason had the advice that you
Right.
gave him. Most people don't get that advice. And they are so desperate. You know, I was in the criminal justice system for 20 years. Crazy things happened to me. I had one person I prosecuted threatened to kill me and my son and found my son's middle school to kill him. I had someone, as I was giving a closing argument, attack me in the courtroom in front of the jury with a shiv he had made and hidden up a body cavity. Crazy things happen in the criminal courthouse. But I always maintained that crazier things happen in the family courts, because things happen that seem so unfair and so unjust, and you have these parents who become so desperate and emotional and volatile, and it becomes very unstable. And so that's why there needs to be a spotlight on this, right? It becomes
Family
very
court
volatile.
is the most, as you've just outlined, the most dangerous court we have.
It is.
You can divide a bank account, but you can't divide a child.
Right.
well, when we come back, what can you do to keep your anger towards your ex out of your children's lives? We'll talk about that with Jason next. What did you say to yourself along the way, and how did you keep control?
I think I realized, one, I don't have a lot of control over anything. I had to follow the order. I would pray for my ex, that she would be a fit mother. It wasn't about me. It was about my daughter having a fit and healthy mom. I kept trying to do the next right thing, and it was hard. And every time I dropped her off, I would just pray that she'd come back safely.
You were concerned not just by what your ex was doing and what you were seeing evidence of, but that she was being exposed to some dangerous situations.
Yes. My daughter's mother got married after we were not together anymore. And I would do a background check because the number one molesters of children are the new boyfriend or husband of the mom. So I was mindful of that.
Well, you bring up that there's risk there with these men, and the statistics tell us that the likelihood of sexual molestation or abuse with a non-biological male in the home is 33 times normal.
Yep.
And the likelihood of a child being killed by a non-biological male is 100 times normal. Non-biological married parents is 9x, bio parents unmarried 5x, single parent cohabiting 20x. There's nothing safer for a child than biological parents living together. Now, your concerns were not unfounded because your ex was ultimately murdered.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
There was a final text message from your ex to you, which reads, "Please tell my daughter I love her."
Mm-hmm. So it was over a year that my daughter hadn't seen her mom before her life was taken. And, delivering her that news was, that was tough.
Yeah, that's not an easy thing for a child to hear, for you or for you to deliver, either one. My final thoughts after the break. You were concerned about choices that your daughter's mother was making.
Yes.
And sure enough, she wound up tragically being murdered. And if you could share what your daughter said when you told her.
So we were at State of the School that night. I got the message right before we walked into the school that they found my daughter's mother. And I kind of white knuckled through the evening, and we were walking in the car, and my daughter could tell I was upset. And I said, yeah, they found your mom, and she's not with us anymore. And she ugly cried, looked at me and said, "I don't want my mom to be dead." And so we went to this spot down by the river on Michigan State's campus, sat on a bench, and I told her my best memories of her mom, because sorry, that's I knew what was coming next, and my daughter was angry with her mother, and we've had to deal with that, so working through some coping skills to forgive herself, that writing letters to her mom, and some other things that to heal that.
And how's your daughter doing now?
She's awesome. She's the best.
I think your daughter won the dad lottery.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A final thought is, this is not a popularity contest, whether you're parenting a child together or whether you're breaking up a marriage. You can't divorce your children. You may divorce their other parent, but you will forever be their parents. And you may think, well, I'm going to get them to like me best now. But I promise you, if you alienate them from the other parent, the day will come, they'll look at you and say, why did you put distance between me and my mother or father? Why did you do that? You didn't need to blow out her candle to make yours burn brighter. You didn't need to blow out his candle to make yours burn brighter. And they will resent you for it. And it's interesting, we have two parents here whose exes are both deceased. There are bells that you can't unring. You can't go back and fix those things now. Next time you think, well, I'll take you to court, by God. You may wish you hadn't.
Thank you for having this important conversation. It's all information that people need to know and nobody wants to talk about.
And thank both of y'all for coming here and sharing it. RJ, thanks for speaking up. I want to thank Judge Rosemary Aquilina, Dr. Charles Stoffe, Lonnie Coombs, all of my guests today. And thank you at home for watching, because here at Dr. Phil Primetime and at Merritt Street Media, we're going to continue to focus on the issues that we're all facing in our society. And boy, do we have issues. We do. My new book, surprisingly, is entitled We've Got Issues: How All Americans Can Stand Strong for Our Country's Soul and Sanity. And it's on sale now everywhere books are sold. Thank you for making it my 10th New York Times bestseller. We will have even more information about tonight's episode on our website, so make sure to log on to drphil.com. Thank you. We'll see you next time.